questions or comments or observations or discussion issues?
If, for instance, I would like to know the content of certain objects in a society.
Yeah.
Not just objects like songs, proverbs in a society or culture. I would like to know, for instance, what would be the procedure here, what technique to use.
What's the database?
Yeah.
Can you tell me? What's the database?
I was thinking of content analysis.
What is content analysis? That's a good technique. Now, what is content analysis?
Well, it's to analyze, you see, for instance, an object, you see what is there, what the meaning of an object, for instance. In music, you take a song, you try to analyze what is its theology, what it means for people and things like that. So that's another thing.
What do you generally do when you analyze? What do you do when you analyze in terms of intellectual activity? What kind of intellectual activity is analysis? How many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? If you aren't, you ought to be, and it helps with a question like this. Bloom's taxonomy Benjamin Bloom, University of Chicago, deceased, in roughly 1954, published a book entitled The Taxonomy of
Learning?
The subtitle is The Cognitive Domain. I'm trying to think of the operative words. We get so many variations on this. Taxonomy of, let's just say, educational outcomes. I think that's what it was. That's pretty sure. Taxonomy of educational outcomes, the cognitive domain. All right. Now, another way to talk about that is to say he was concerned about what sorts of things come out of the use of the mind. And in his taxonomy, which I always describe from the bottom up, 6 pieces. Bottom is foundational. The first basic use of the mind is what? Huh? Recall. What did I just say? Huh? What did I just say?
What is the first use of the mind?
And the answer?
Recall.
Now he's demonstrating
Recall.
recall and doing it well. And we say in terms of that use of the mind, that's exactly what we're talking about. Okay? Now then, the second use of the mind, or the second level of the use of the mind is understanding. Now, how is understanding different from recall?
More than parroting.
It is more than recall. Okay, now that's why it's on level 2, not level 1. But why, in what way?
It processes it, applies it.
Not yet, not yet, not yet.
That's a synthesis involved.
Not yet, not yet. What haven't I done when I recall something that I would have done if I'd shown understanding of it?
Internalization.
Comprehension.
That's a good word. Let's put that one down here with a parenthesis. Comprehension. Now, how do I know if I've comprehended something? Oh, that's a valuable handle to put on that one. The capacity to restate in my own words or in a different set of words. To restate. Right? That's the second level of the use of the mind. Now, if the only thing I can say, what's the first level of the use of the mind? And then you say, recall. You know, you say, come on, guys, what does recall mean? So he says, oh, recall. explain recall. Well, recall, recall, And that's where an awful lot of teenagers today seem to be hung up. What do you know, man? Understanding. Recall. Well, recall is when I can remember what was said, even if I can't remember the word. I've given you there a good illustration of understanding of the idea recall. Okay, third is application. Thank you. Some of you have internalized this. I do hope that you can, because there's no more important thing, I think, to think with as an educator than this structure of 6 points. Application is what? Being able to use it in the sense of as an idea. Not necessarily do it or some kind of complicated thing, but recall is when we simply teach in such a way that we value the right answer. We test for specific right answers, and we are not concerned about much else than those right answers. Now, I've given you a bunch of words that illustrate application of the recall idea. I've illustrated it. Does that make sense? Now we're going to pair right here 4 and 5, which are the...
By the way, it seems to me like there's an awful lot of education in America that's number one.
There's an awful lot of education in America that's number one. You haven't got to the where American education really shines in 4, 5, and 6. Stick around.
Okay.
Stick around. I'll show you where it really shines. And then you can evaluate Trinity Singing. What is 4? What is 5? These are the twin brothers.
Analysis.
Now we have analysis here. And that's one reason I needed this, because he was using the word analysis, and I want to make sure we're really using it right. Analysis and its twin brother, synthesis. And by the way, these are twins only in the sense that one is foundational to the other, but they interact a whole lot. When you analyze something, is it more or less demanding intellectually than when you synthesize something? More or less demanding? Which? Pardon? Is what?
More demanding.
More demanding. Synthesis is more demanding. It's higher on the schedule, and it's in fact more demanding. That's why it's number 5, not number 4. Okay? But the big difference is, analysis is, I'm going to analyze the stuff on this desk. Now watch me. I've analyzed it. What did I do? I took it apart and created some kind of an orderly system. Put all the folders here, put the thing that looks like this here, thing that looks like this, a whole bunch of things that look like these, and one thing that looks like that. What was that?
Classification.
Classification, any kind of a scheme by which we make an orderly array that has categories in it and has some handle on that stuff. Okay? Analysis. Synthesis requires a deeper look. And then I go through these folders and I find, oh my goodness, there's 2 that relate to this. There's 1 that relates to this. Nothing that relates there. It depends on how we use those, but I come up with something different, you see, because I'm trying to put things together in new configurations. And that is inherently more demanding. Which of the 2 has more probability of creativity in it? Now there's 1 more left. What is it?
Wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you. This is where Bloom and I part company, because he used the word evaluation, and in my opinion, that word is too commonly used by people to mean what he wasn't driving at. Evaluation for many people means testing. He's talking about the evaluative use of the mind. use the mind to make a judgment. Using the mind to make a judgment, he says, is the highest level. It is an evaluative use of the mind. Woo! Exciting. Is that not God's purpose for us in development as Christians? Huh? Eh? So where are we headed in the educational process? Toward judgment. Capacity for judgment. Godly, informed judgment. Does that make you feel good? Yes. Makes me feel good. I think that's where we're headed. Not testing, not, scores, but the evaluative use of the mind. The synthetic use of the mind, the analytic use of the mind, the applicational use of the mind, the understanding use of the mind, and recall. Which of these can you do without? If you're really concerned about the whole development of a person, which can you do without? One more bad question. None. None. Each of these has a supportive relationship to the next, which is why I like to line them up 1 through 6. Because then people can see how this one depends on this. Okay? Now then, if we're concerned about synthesis, which was the point that was being made over here, which one of you guys was making? You were making. All right. Now, make your point again if you haven't forgotten. If you have, that's understandable.
Yeah, I was talking about content analysis.
Content analysis. Right? Now, analysis is essentially breaking things down, right?
Okay.
Now, when we do content analysis, we have to have content. So first of all, we got to get from the database a content to analyze. And when we analyze it, we break it down and categorize it. And that indeed is one of the central tasks in this course as we take our field notes from interviews and our field notes from observations and look within them for what that content is telling us, and we break it down in an analytic way.
Then we can come up, for instance, with themes,
Good.
patterns,
Good. Themes,
categories.
patterns. Exactly. And you've read enough now to know that that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get the verbal stuff to analyze? Because you see, if we're not working from documents, and interviews and observations aren't going to give us documents, what are we going to work from? From what we hear, from what we see, from what people are saying, what people are doing, and how does that ever get to the point where it can be called verbal in order to make a verbal analysis of it? How does it get there?
Somebody's got to ask a question.
Huh?
Seems like someone that's got to ask a question.
Somebody's got to ask a question, somebody's got to answer a question, somebody's got to describe what was said, what was done. And who do you suppose is going to end up doing that describing? The observer, the interviewer. And the stuff you write down is called field notes. So what you are going to be analyzing then is field notes. You're going to be doing content analysis of field notes. That's exactly what the task is. Does that make sense? And that's what we're going to focus on in here this week. Okay? Any other comments, observations, or discussional matters that you want to bring up? How do you go at observing? Let me ask you a practical question. Is it more important to know in advance of an observation what it is you're looking for? Or is it more important to discover what there is to see? Have some opinions about that, anybody?
Discover what you're watching.
Why do you say that?
So I think you can go in with one idea and come up with which could frame the way that you would view that observation. Versus if you go with open mind, you may discover something that you didn't anticipate that is really the crux of your purposes.
All right, now, let me see if I'm hearing correctly, and now let's try to repeat the question. The question I ask is a kind of a nonsense question because both are important and both are possible. And I'm trying to help you see that not every question that you can ask deserves an answer. Sometimes they're stupid questions that don't need answers. But in this particular case, I think there is an answer, and I'm pleased that you were willing to take it up. I asked the question, is it more important to know what you're looking for in an observation, or to let the situation itself tell you what's important to look at?
Couldn't it depend on the context?
Well, what he just said was, some of you heard him. I wasn't the only one listening, I suspect. What did he say? How did you hear him? He made an answer. He put his vote on one side or the other. What did he say?
If you do it inductively, you'll be more prepared to take in whatever you see, instead of screening some things in and out. Or screen, what you observe.
That's a good interpretation, I think. Is that a fair interpretation of your point? Now, you're going to have to start listening to each other because we're worried about skills here. And when you have no response at all to a question like that, I worry about you because it tells me that your skills are just somewhere near your boots, the bottom of your boots rather than the top. You used a word there that he didn't use that helps, I think, to focus the question, the issue. Did you hear the term that he used? He used a technical term. He used inductive. Okay. Now, what did he mean by inductive? Inductive can mean anything. If you don't believe that, go to an inductive Bible class. It can mean anything or nothing, because many people use the word in so-called inductive Bible classes and then do everything deductively. What did he mean by that inductive? In the very way he answered that question, what was he saying?
Let the observation be the information.
Okay, let the observation itself lead itself or be its information. I would 100% come down for that, except a 10% nagging concern. And that is that it sounds like you can go in unprepared. That's my 10% nagging concern. If you don't have any idea what you're going for, you may not have any idea when you get done. You better have something in mind. But to have too much in mind, to be going after a list of, here are my questions, is bad observational technique. Because you will see those things that you predetermined and quite possibly miss things that are more important. So in my opinion, his answer is a good one, and probably the best one. And that is, any observation requires a willingness to let the experience lead you. Now, if you're going to let the experience lead you, what will that require of you? What will you have to do? How will be your mental state? Describe yourself as an observer.
Flexible.
You'll have to be flexible. You'll have to be not tied to an agenda or groping until the next question can get answered. What else? This is a good start. What else is going to have to be true of you as an observer? What are some principles here? Huh?
Non-prejudice. Non-prejudice.
Non-prejudice. Is that what you said? Okay. Non-prejudiced. In that use of the word prejudice, what would be prejudiced in an observer? How would you behave if you were prejudiced?
When you have some assumptions already thought, and so you're going to be led by your assumptions. And
You're going to be led by your own presuppositions and assumptions. And that'll happen to any of us if we don't watch out.
But it is a judgment that you have preconceived.
And that's, I think, the meaning of prejudice. And that's basic to all prejudice, including racial prejudice and interpersonal prejudice and social prejudice. All prejudice is based on the notion of, I already know what that person is like. what that situation is like. And what I'm going to do is find evidence. So what we do too easily is to go into an observation like a hook with bait on it. I'm going to get that fish. I'm going to get that fish. Ah, I got it. Just the fish I want. And that is a dangerous thing to do. We're far better off to come in, I don't know what's going to come out here. I don't know what I'm going to discover. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. And try real hard to make that true. It's difficult to do because you have to erase a lot of bias and erase a lot of presupposition. But you're far better off to say, I'm here to learn. I'm here to discover. That's what marks a good scientist. I'm here to discover. And the place where you will practice that is in these little field exercises for our work this next few days. And you want to anticipate, choose a situation because of its likelihood that it will bring you into an encounter with something that will be interesting. Try to be motivated by interest, not by preconception. Be motivated by interest, not preconception. When I listen to somebody say, you know, I'm thinking about with my partner, we're going to go to such and such a place, then I will quite often say, what do you expect to find? And believe me, what you say next is going to have a lot to do with my opinion about whether that'll be a good experience for you or not. What could I hear you say that would cause me to say, try to find something else? What would you say? What would it sound like? Let's try it. You're planning to go there. Now, what do you expect to find there? Anybody, try it. What would you say?
I don't know.
No.
Yeah, whole list. This and this and this.
Well, you got a list there, huh? You're pretty sure that you'll find those things. Yeah. And the more sure you are that that's what you're going to find, the more I'm going to be suspicious that that won't be a good experience. You see it? Now, if somebody says, well, you know, I don't really know, but I'm curious. I'm going to get interested. I have heard that, but I wonder. That's good. That's good. You see it? Now, if a person says, I don't know why we're going there, that's going to cause me to say, bad news. Bad news. I want to hear something. You know, you've got it picked out for some reason. There's something that grabs you. But try to avoid being turned on by things that will simply reinforce your prejudices and your previous knowledge. That's one reason why I suggested that if you're both from Abyssinia, to use an old name, let's don't go to the Abyssinian church, because you already know what's going to happen there. Let's go somewhere else. Now, in terms of the options on situations, you don't have to think in terms of church frameworks, but that is the easiest way to think. Because in general, you can present yourself to a pastor or a Christian ed leader and say, I'm a student at Trinity and I need, you know, this stupid course I'm in. They're requiring me to put in some time observing. And, you know, you can play on his sympathy or her sympathy if you want to. They don't very often call me up and tell me what you said. Sorry, play on the sympathy. And one thing I would recommend you do is don't use the word research. I'm in training for research. That's a little bit like I'm in training to be a spook. People don't know what research means, except that they see it on television every now and then, and always is some guy who has a white coat, and he's recommending that you not take this medicine, but you take this medicine. Because this one is made out of saw palmetto, and this one is made out of chemicals. And of course, saw palmetto is natural, doesn't have any chemicals in it. And, you know, they've seen that view of research, and that's, in many cases, all people are going on. Secondly, there is a tendency of people to be much more interested in your personality and your warmth than in your status. And the very fact that you're a PhD student is a real royal turn-off for a lot of folks. So don't try to use that as your entry. Say, I've taken a course in Christian Ed out here at the seminary, and one of the things they've asked me to do is I got a partner, and we need to get into a situation where we can watch kids do so-and-so, or participate with, or observe this, or talk to people about that. They're going to be much more sympathetic. But churches are unnatural. Churches are not the only kind of situation you can get into. You can get into lots of situations that are really public domain situations. In other words, nobody can stop you from standing on a street corner and watching traffic. There is no law against it if you're not blocking the traffic. There are some things that you just can't get into because of the mores and the growing societal anxieties in the world today. You cannot expect to get a free entry or easy entry to a school, believe it or not. And there again, you're much more apt to get somewhere in a Christian school than you are in a public school. Because the Christian school will identify with your Trinity status. The public school will not. And public schools are getting very gun shy. And they've had enough trouble with guns to be gun shy. And they're not sure. And if a school administrator were to let you come in and observe or stand around in the school grounds, and some incident would occur, that school administrator who said yes to you would be liable. And it would be bad news. So many of them are, in today's world, very, very uneasy. So don't assume anything. Any place where you or your partner has a friend or a contact or an administrator or an organizer or a planner or a person that is respected in that institution, if you both know an individual who is on that school board, you'd be far better off flying that flag than any other. But make sure that you do get permission wherever you're going to go, and that you don't shoot for something that is just totally ridiculous. We used to say, you can always go and get a shopping cart and push it around in a mall or in a grocery store. You can learn a lot pushing a cart around a grocery store. But we have even had some incidents with people pushing shopping carts. Because if they're not legitimately shopping, they're taking up space and they're bothering everybody else. And if you start watching somebody too closely, that person will go to the manager and say, I don't know what this person's doing, but there's nothing in his cart, and he's been following me for 20 minutes. And so you got to think about that. You got to think about these things, and that's one of my jobs here is to hear out your ideas so that I can kind of warn you away from problems. You need to think about the question of what is your entrance key? What is your access? That's the word, access. How do you get into that situation? Access. You do not need to explain your strategy in detail or try to explain to that person what's involved in the, good. You're just now coming to that. That's the permits. I'm just now ready for that. Sure. Very, very helpful. We have a permission procedure here in the institution. Every institution has this. Trinity was just one of the last.
You don't need me here for this, no.
Thank you.
We'll miss you.
Trinity was one of the last institutions in the modern world to get a committee to approve inquiry into issues of human subjects. And now we impose that or require that even for observations and field work for this class, but certainly for dissertations and the like. And so these will need to be prepared for you and your partner. Each of you take a copy, but you'll need to prepare that in advance. And you don't have permission to go someplace until you get that back approved from the committee here. We have a short process for the purpose of this course. Linda is the short process. She's the chairperson of that committee. And I go over them and review them and satisfy myself, pass them to Linda, and she quite often takes it on the strength of my advice and goes ahead and passes it. But it can be challenged, not just by me. And you've got to indicate what kinds of things you're going to do, what you're going to ask, who you're going to contact, and all this is designed to prevent the sort of thing that happens when people are abusing their privileges with other human beings. It's an important concern. And believe me, this is not unique to Trinity. This is standard in the research community today, and higher education in general. You can study that thing later, but you'll need it before you set foot on another situation. Do you have to get this approved before you talk to someone in that situation? No, in fact, it won't work that way. If you haven't talked to someone in that situation, do you need an extra?
Muriel can get one.
Oh, okay. You have to know that you can get in before you make an application, right? So it's a question of chicken and egg, right? Which comes first? The answer is both. So you got to do all that as you're doing this, and it's a good idea to float the idea past, as we'll give you a chance even tomorrow to float some ideas past. And we'll hear some ideas from people tomorrow that'll give you some clues as to what you're really looking for, and I'll give you some more advice on it. So study this tonight. Now, observation requires an open mind, but a sense of direction. And what I'm suggesting to you is that there is a conflict there that never will be resolved. How do you have an open mind and still have a sense of direction? And the answer is, you've got to play both of those values backwards and forward. If you can't say what is the possibility for discovering certain kinds of things, then you don't have enough direction. If you believe that you must determine in advance what you will discover, what you will find, then you've got too much direction. Does that make sense? So it's a delicate balance, but it is the life of the researcher. And therefore it's a real task for you, for your competency as a professional. When some of you came back in the room, you were already sitting. Some of you weren't here. I came in, and those of you who were really observant noticed that I, first of all, did something. Then I did something else. And I know there were enough people watching me at that moment to know that there are people who have the potential for answering this question. What was the first thing I did when I came in? Now, it isn't fair to expect people to be observing if they haven't been warned to turn on their antenna, right? I knew that. And heaven knows I'm not a good casual observer either. But I'm giving you a chance to see in this course more than you generally see. I'm going to hold you accountable for it. So turn on your antenna from now on. Because from time to time, there are going to be incidents like this one that I have definitely set up. Just like I set this one up. There's one person in here who was observant enough that he spotted it. I'm going to ask him to keep quiet. Okay? Stay out of it. You've got it. First thing I did when I came in here was what? That was second.
Set down.
Got my coat off and put it over there. Got my coat off and put it over there, and then I came over here. That was just to cover those of you who were really watching, all right? I came over and picked up a stack of 3x5 cards. And then what? Now here's where we're going to divide the good guys from the bad guys. What happened next?
Straighten up.
Good. And pass them out.
No,
Is that what you said?
No, you gave them
Yeah,
to one person and speak another.
one person and skipped another, and then another person, and did anybody watch that closely?
We discovered because we were skipped.
Oh, you were skipped, huh?
That's great.
You were skipped. Anybody else observe anything about that? The blank seats got a lot of cards, where people weren't in yet. Put a lot of cards down, except I forgot the back table. Was there any pattern in what I did with those cards? It seemed random. Is that what you said? It seemed random. By the way, that is a good phrase to use in your field notes. It seemed random. Or it seemed that the pattern was alternate persons. It seemed that every third person was in it. It seemed that. Now, what's better about that phrase than it was random? Every third person was skipped. The point is that you should get in the habit in your field notes not to state what you cannot back up. Perfectly legitimate to say, it seemed, or as best I could see it, it was. Keep it flexible, but faithful to what you actually saw. Now, if I had gone one yes, one no, one yes, one no, one yes, one no, one yes, one no, a number of you would have spotted that. I'm reasonably comfortable because I saw you watching. But I didn't do it that way. I did, in fact, distribute them randomly. So there was an intensity over here that was not matched over here. There were twos at a time skipped over here, and then there were threes at a time distributed over here. It was very definitely a random pattern. So he's dead right. It seemed to him, the observer, to be random. And he gave a good phrase that would be nice in the field notes. All right? Now, the reason I did that is because actually I need to pass one to everybody. So put your hand out if you didn't get one. But I just wanted to use this as a momentary example. Everybody got one there? Okay, I need to collect your names and addresses, so here we go. Let's use these cards. Put your card like this, and right along here, put your last name so that they can alphabetize the list. You're going to type up a class list. So your name is Johnson William. If you'd rather be called Johnson, Bill, use Bill. If you'd rather be called Reginald, fine. If you'd rather be called Reggie, that's fine too. Whatever you want to be called. All right? Last name, family name, and first name, regular call name. Got it? Get that down? Under that, your telephone number where we can contact you while this course is going on. Now, preferably not a number in Kenya. Your contact phone this week and next, okay? This will be the most important thing that you put on the card. Some way that people can call you and get through to you. If it's in Ann Arbor, if it's in South Bend, or wherever, put that down. But you might put parenthesis after it, say South Bend, Indiana, so that people have some idea where they're calling. Because if you have no contact on campus, that'll be it. All right? That's your contact. Under that, your current or contact address in some detail. Street and how we could write to you so that can be kept for later purpose. But the main thing is your name and that phone number. Now you got the address under there so that we got that on the record, and put that on a couple lines, your street and your box or whatever, and your town and your state and the zip code. Again, this next couple weeks, don't put down Yokohama. This next couple weeks. All right? Under that, skip a line. And put down your standard continuing address if it's different from the above. In other words, I hate to use the word permanent address because no one in this world has a permanent address. but what you would consider your home base address. And that, if it's Yokohama, that's fine. So that if somebody picks up this sheet a year from now, and they find out you're no longer in South Bend, then they could call Yokohama, and here you are. All right? And if there is a phone number for that one, that'd be nice to add to that. The address and phone number on a permanent or long-term basis. After that, skip a line and put down in short phrases. You don't need separate lines for each. Just put a comma after each or a semicolon. The kinds of ministry you've engaged in across your career. Putting the ones at the first that are the most dominant. For example, professor at Asbury College. Anything about your professional experience would help us say, I know where this person's coming from. I know what he's been doing, she's been doing. I know what this person's all about. So we get a picture of who you are in terms of the situation. And when you get that done, you're done. That's all we need on a card. Whenever the cards are done, you can pass them, maybe pass them around this way, and I'll collect them from this end of the table. Please don't fail to pass it around. These will be hopefully typed up somewhere before the second coming. And, or maybe we won't need to, depending on $60. I want to go back to observation. When I passed those cards out the first time, everybody, did or didn't get one. Somebody spotted that there was some kind of discrimination going on. Was anybody able to interpret what the reason was?
I decided that perhaps you only needed one for us because you're married.
And you weren't observing of the fact that there were some others that didn't get it?
I missed that point.
All right. So you, and then by the time I got there, I began to intensify, so you wouldn't have, yeah. Okay. Now, what do you call that kind of a mindset? Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he said? Somebody say it. What did he say?
He said that he assumed that you thought they were married, or that you knew they were married.
And that the married couple only needed a car.
Right.
That's common for addresses. What would you call that kind of statement that he made? What category of rhetoric is it? Was it an opinion?
Speculation.
Speculation?
Assumption.
Assumption? Presupposition? There are a couple of the good words. It was perhaps any of those.
Interpretation.
It was an interpretation. That's another good word.
Presumption? Did you say presumption?
Presumption. And the word presumption and the word assumption are subtly different, but they mean basically the same idea. In a scientific realm, which is what we're trying to cultivate around here this week, what might be another word hasn't been used?
Deduction.
Might be a deduction. That isn't the word, however.
Hypothesis.
Thank you, hypothesis. Now, I'm not endorsing that word. I'm just simply saying that's another word. It wasn't mentioned. I wanted to get it onto the table. Now, let's look at some of these and see what's the most promising word. Can we rule any of those words out? You can rule the word hypothesis out on what ground?
because I'm trying to avoid using assumption.
Yeah.
Because for you to postulate the hypothesis is usually based on certain assumptions about the nature of reality as you see.
And it better be based on some other things too, and that's one of the problems here. Before it's a hypothesis, it better be based upon
Certain experimental facts also.
certain testable propositions. You don't talk hypothesis until you get it up to the shape where you can test it. Now, we could argue that he might be able to test it, but as a matter of fact, he wasn't able to test it because there weren't enough situations that he knew were parallel.
Well, and on the other hand, I did test it by asking you, and you ignored me. And I observed that.
So I think we can safely rule out hypothesis. The conditions of the experiment just weren't there. So we probably are better off thinking of it as a, he said it, I assumed. Very informal word, very reasonable word, was an assumption. It satisfied him. That's how you know it's an assumption. It ended his questioning process. And that's unfortunately what an assumption does. Oh, I assume so-and-so. So I quit asking. Assumption is very dangerous because it too easily becomes the end of the process. It's like a primitive conclusion that closes things rather than opens them. So I assume that. Oh, this is not a social criticism.
Yeah,
please understand.
Yeah.
This is just, the way we live, the way we operate, the way we use words, and so on. To do good observation, you need to pay attention to the patterns that could turn into hypotheses. There's the key. When you really have your observational skills going, you've got the engine going, watch for patterns. Now, what's a pattern? And I can't think of a better illustration than the one I just used. That's why I used it. There either was a pattern there, or there wasn't a pattern. If the pattern was decipherable, then you have the grounds for a hypothesis. If it wasn't decipherable, you end up saying what you said. That the pattern seemed to be random. But the point is, he saw a condition that either had a pattern or didn't have a pattern. And random is the word for not having a pattern. And that's exactly the first thing you do when you observe anything. You look for the patterns. You got a teacher that's meeting a Sunday school class. The class members all come in. One by one, the teacher makes a bit of show over every one, except one. Is that a pattern? Oh, Jill, it's so nice to see you this morning. Have you had a nice week? Gee, that's a lovely dress you're wearing today. Teacher does that for every kid that comes through the door, except one.
It could be a pattern if that's what she did every day.
Why is it not a pattern then? Never mind the everyday.
Well, it depends on which way you're looking at it, because I think a pattern is being plural. So if you're looking at it from her perspective, well, I guess if you're looking at it from the teacher's perspective, it could be a pattern.
You're not. You're looking at it from the observer's perspective. But you can't get into the teacher. So you have to look from the observer's point of view. That's another important thing to remember. You're looking as an observer. You can't get into the mind of the other. You start making any kind of judgments about the mind of the other, you're going to get in trouble. Is there a pattern there?
It's not a pattern.
Now, part of the problem is that I'm trying to spook out a semantic problem with some people's use of the word pattern. And basically, that's as far as I need to go with this particular task, but I want you to all use the word pattern in the same way. There is a pattern there. I'm going to tell you about another teacher. Every kid that comes through the door, teacher pays a lot of attention, makes over them, remarks on clothes or whatever else, and you look so nice today, Jill, and all the rest, does it for every single one without fail. Is there a pattern there? Isn't that the same question I just asked you? For the teacher who does it for 7 and not the 8th, is there a pattern?
Yeah.
Yes. For the teacher who does it for all 8 or however many without fail, is there a pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are the patterns the same? That's not right. Pattern is what puts you onto the possibility of seeing the differences. Now, if I said to you, there's a teacher who pays attention to about half the kids, and there's another teacher that doesn't pay attention to any of the kids, is there a difference in those two teachers? What is the difference? The patterns are different. You see, a pattern doesn't have to be a predictability in the sense of all or none. It can be whatever is that can be focused in any way that can be used as comparison.
So it could be a snapshot. It doesn't have to be a video.
That's right. That's right. Every morning when I get up, the first thing I do is put on my shoes. Very first thing, socks and shoes. Before I put anything else on, socks and shoes. Is there a pattern there? Never mind that it's weird. Is there a pattern? Absolutely. You get up every morning and do a whole lot of other things and don't put on your socks and shoes. Never put your socks and shoes on until everything else is on. Is there a pattern there? Yeah. A pattern is anything that you can see for its consistency or its inconsistency, for its commonness or for its differentiation. That's what we mean by pattern. So when we look for patterns, it does not mean we're looking for things that always happen. It means we're looking at whether or not they happen. That's what a pattern is. How many of you drive to campus? Those of you who drive to the campus, do you always arrive on the campus from the east or from the west? Without fail, either the east or the west, always. How many of you are east arrivers who come from Telegraph Road, from Waukegan Road, that direction? Always you arrive that way. Let me see your hands. All right? West arrivers, always from the expressway side, always from the west. Always from the west. Let me see your hands. The very fact that those hands went up tells me that you know what your pattern is. The fact that it was different sets of people with their hands in the air on the two questions tells me the patterns are different. Does it make any difference which way you arrive from campus, on campus? Either way you get to the campus, fine. Never mind. But if I'm really concerned about patterns of traffic onto the campus, what did I just say? I've got to know the pattern. And I've got to be able to quantify it if possible. And say that there are twice as many people doing it this way as that way. But at the very basic level of observation, I've got to be able to see the difference. Could you go out and watch traffic coming onto the campus? In your mind's eye, try it. You've witnessed traffic onto the campus. You witnessed different kinds of things. Do you ever notice any different things as you watch other drivers coming onto the campus? What are some of the things you notice? whether or not they do this or that, or whether or not they do this or that, or I see some doing this and I see others not doing it. What kind of statements can you make? People driving on the campus. Come on, let's try it.
Some people use their turn signals and some people don't.
Ah, some people use turn signals and some people don't. Is that a pattern? If she really had observed it closely enough that she could be able to talk about cases or numbers, you're describing a pattern. What if they all use the turn signals? Is that a pattern? What good does it do to know that?
Watch out when you turn out.
At this point, you don't know what it means. You don't have to know what it means. You just know that there are differences there. You do not have to worry yourself with what does it mean. Because in your first work in observation, you're getting into the database, not into the conclusions. What is the step in the research process when you draw conclusions? Where does that occur? Early or late? Generally, very late. The end, save maybe one point. That is your final interpretative comment on the conclusion. It's the last thing. You don't have to worry, what does it mean? It's different. And when you're doing some of the work for these rather primitive little exercises, don't worry yourself if you don't know what it means. It's far better off not to judge it. Far better off not to judge it prematurely. Hold off on the judgment. Now, when you're observing then, what are you looking for? When you're observing, what are you looking for? You can answer that at 2 or 3 levels of specificity. I don't care where you start. Let's take it from whatever you got. What are you looking for?
A pattern?
All right, that's a fairly technical level of response. You're looking for patterns. Anything you can see that suggests a pattern. We didn't say suggests a meaning for that pattern. It's just a pattern. Everybody that shows up on this campus wearing a green band around the top of their head. Now, if you say that, somebody will come back, wonder what that means. And if you say, I don't know, they'll say, well, what kind of researcher are you? And you say, a good one, thank you. A good one, thank you. Because until I noticed that they were all wearing green bands, nobody made anything of it. I still don't know what it means, but it's a pattern. Don't worry if you can't instantly interpret. You've got to start with the data. Are we coming through? Start with what is there. Describe it, but think primarily in terms of things that have pattern characteristics. Okay?